Hello, my name is Gail Unsworth. I am the widow of John Fraser Unsworth. I am now 68 years old, and I live in Mayungu, just outside of Malindi. I'll just take a bit of history of my past and tell you about our love story. I met John in 2020 on the internet on a private a dating site, and we corresponded for 18 months. And we agreed that we are going to be very honest with each other about how we feel and how we're going to progress in our relationship. So I flew down to Kenya, or flew up to Kenya in the beginning of 2021 to meet John and his two children. And then John came down to South Africa to meet my big family, and we just hit it off from the beginning. Me being a widow in South Africa with two young sons, I felt that I have to look for a man that is rearing his own children, because he would understand and be able to be a father to my two sons. So we all just bonded immediately. It was amazing. You know, I hadn't met John in person, but when I did meet him, it was amazing. And I realized that if I wanted the relationship to go any further, I would have to pack up in South Africa and move to Kenya. Obviously, my family all were up in arms saying, what do I want to go and do up in Africa? But I felt this is the move that God wanted me to make. So my two sons, David and Luke, and I packed up in South Africa and made the move. I was a widow as well in South Africa. My husband there passed away from a heat stroke. He was only 42 years old, and I was actually working three jobs at the time. Plus, I was homeschooling my boys. So I was living a very hard life. And I knew that I had to do something about improving my life and the lives of my children. And we then made the move up to Kenya in April 2022. And at that time, my John and his dad had a small shopping centre on Ngong Road called Lenana Forest Centre, which they later sold to a pharmaceutical company. But before that, John and his dad, Jerry Unsworth, were actually tea tasters. And obviously that all fell apart when the KTDA were established. John's dad was stationed in India from a very, in his 20s. He was a pilot in the Second World War and stationed in India, and he stayed on afterwards and became a tea taster. And obviously John followed his father into the same profession. And when, as I say, they built this small little shopping centre. So when I came to Kenya, I opened a small little bakery and a butchery making South African products, and a restaurant which it had a beautiful aura and ambience to it, because I loved people, and I enjoyed entertaining people and caring for people. Just by the way, I also had the Lenana slum orphans that I was looking after. I had 106 children, orphans, that I was looking after, and unfortunately I lost 6 babies. Most of the orphans' moms and dads had passed away from HIV. So I was very, very blessed to get help from NGOs, St. Gertrude's Hospital, and even a small village outside Prague in the Czech Republic that donated quite a lot of money. So I managed to place all the children into foster homes, and I know some of the children have progressed so well. One of the guys has become a doctor, the other one has become a journalist in London. A lot of the girls became nurses, and I'm very pleased that I could play a part in what became my love for Kenya. John and I got married in 2003, and I became a Kenyan citizen in 2008. John was also a Kenyan citizen. They came to Kenya in 1957, straight from India. If I'm correct, John's dad actually taught the new trainees of KTDA, and he's actually written a book about what he did. Very interesting man. And anyway, so I had the restaurant and the shops at Lenana Forest Centre. David eventually finished his grade 12, as you would say in South Africa, and went straight into IAT College in Westlands, and completed his computer studies. And Luke went to a small little tuition centre in Keleleshwa called Webb's, and he finished his grade 12 as well, and he then when he went to Webb's, he did Cambridge International, and got an amazing score of 98%, which allowed him to be accepted into a flying school in South Africa. And David has now got his own little company, and he's just advanced so well in IT technology. So John always said he wanted to come down to live by the coast. His dad did have a house, 3 houses before the Marine Park in Malindi, called the Pink House. And John's whole life and his 2 children's lives were spent at the Pink House at least 4 times a year. So that was the family home. And when Jerry's health started deteriorating, we started talking about, or they were talking about selling the shopping centre, and John buying and building a house in Malindi to retire. So we bought this plot, Chamber Kibabanshi 327. We bought this plot in 2007. John was very particular about making sure that due diligence was done properly through his lawyers, and they said John can go ahead and they will start on the purchase agreement because the due diligence was all in place. Then we put up a barbed wire fence around this property, which is 8.4 acres. And we've got Dr. Kubo on the one side, and we've got Dr. Rhoda Kahara on the other side. And but when we got here, it was just us. There was just coral. That's all that was on the property. But John was adamant he was going to build a home here. And I've got photos of the property from the first time that we put our foot on the property here. And we've taken photos of the progress of the building from the foundation to the clearing of the land. And oh my word, trying to flatten this coral was another story. When we bought the land, there was only baobabs and indigenous teak trees on the property. There was definitely nothing else here except coral. But then we started a building in 2008 after we had got a building permission. I've got the certificate for that and our building plans. And also, which I didn't realize was happening was John had actually started subdividing the property, which stands on the government survey map as seven plots with numbers. So in actual fact, it shouldn't even be 327 anymore. It's got other numbers. And then we carried on building, and everything was going according to plan. Then suddenly in 2009, the DCI came knocking on the door and they said that Mr. RAILA Odinga owns the property. So the DCI from Malindi, Superintendent John Kariuki, did a full investigation on the property. He investigated our mortgage at Stanbic Bank, which, to my knowledge, you can't get a mortgage unless your due diligence is in place. And they looked at all John's documents, they looked at all our payment plans, and then we went through the whole, well, John went through the whole process of the court case, and Virginia Shaw was his lawyer, and obviously and unfortunately the judgment was in Mr. Odinga's favour, so my husband went to the appeal court, and the ruling of the appeal stated that my husband was the owner of the property, and the DCI returned the original title deed back to him. So we did not hear from Mr. Odinga again. There was a bit of a movement which I only picked up once I started going back in John's backup files on his computer that Mr. Odinga had actually started a court case, 41 of 2012. Oh, no, 2012, yes.
During that time, John was, your husband was still alive?
Yes, John was still alive. This must have been in 2012 when the ruling of the appeal wasn't yet announced. There seemed to have been something to do with a court case number ELC 41 of 2012, which I've got proof of an email from Virginia Shaw telling John that the case was dismissed because it held no evidence.
Who was
and John, my husband John.
Oh.
My husband John.
Oh, your son is David?
My son is David,
Oh,
yes. Thank the Lord for my son. He's really supported me all the way. Yes, as I say, Virginia's reply to John was that this ELC 41 of 2012 was thrown out of court because it held no essence. There is also an affidavit from John about this 41 of 2012, and the criminal case that Mr. Odinga opened against some people. I didn't know anything about the criminal case at all. I mean, I was so busy with my life and getting our lives in order, and actually by that time looking after my father-in-law, who was deteriorating very fast. I didn't even read the criminal case because I knew it had nothing to do with us. I think John's name was only mentioned in this criminal case, but and I know.
What was the criminal case about?
Mr. Odinga was accusing Mr. Kazungu Diwani, Mr. Odur, and the lands officer. Oh golly gosh, I can't even remember what her name was. Of illegal dealings on the property. So I wasn't sure what was happening at that time. It was all very vague to me because I didn't involve myself. But what happened then? So I know Mr. Diwani passed away before RAILA restarted ELC 41 2012. Mr. Diwani had already passed away. I mean, you know, the DCI went through the purchase agreement, they went through the transfer agreement, and, you know, if they felt John was in the wrong, my husband John was in the wrong, they would have said something. And John, being a gentleman, he would have packed up his stuff and left the property, because that's just the type of person he is. He still believed in the old gentleman's handshake. Very much of a gentleman and a lovely man. I miss him terribly. He was definitely my soulmate. We were very, very happy. He never ever said a swear word in front of me, or we never had an argument, ever. In the 16 years we were together, and he was such a good father to his children and to my children as well. He was a man of note, that's for sure. So, you know, I didn't really think of anything, and John's dad passed away in August 2013, And a month after he passed away, my husband John was diagnosed with cancer of the mouth, and we sorted out things with my father-in-law's funeral, and John was the executor. So there was a lot of things to do, but he was trying to cope with what was happening with him as well. We were all in shock, and the whole family got together. We really stood together. Even Neil and Michelle, John's two children, we returned back to Kenya in late 2015, and came back to the plot, and he just wanted to be here. But obviously we had to also be in Nairobi, because by this time we had sold our house in Nairobi as well, and that money that we sold the house was put into Imperial Bank and Chase Bank. So most of that money is still laying in Imperial and Chase Bank. And then we had to go back to South Africa for John to have a checkup, and the South African embassy insisted he has a lung x-ray. So John went to the hospital to have the x-ray, and the doctor said, "I'm so sorry, but your lungs are covered in cancer," which was another blow to our family. And John decided he wasn't going to go to South Africa. He was just going to sit it out. And he said, "I want to be on my property. I want to die on my property." We flew down, and, you know, when we were on the plane and I asked for safe travelling mercies, I knew this was John's last flight. So John then passed away in September 2016, on the property. We did receive his ashes. I've still got quite a bit here. I did sprinkle some in the front and on the little banda where he used to sit. And I put a little spirit temple up where he was going to build the koi pond. And he said to me, when the day comes, when there's a showdown, if there is a showdown, I must sprinkle the rest of his ashes on the property. So 3 months after John passed away, Mr. Odinga came onto the property, and I wasn't here, unfortunately. I had friends staying in my house and my guest house. By the way, there was a article on the news where they said that I had 6 houses on the property. Well, I can say they are wrong, because I've got my house and I've got a guest house. I've got a swimming pool and I've got staff quarters and a generator room. But definitely not 6 houses on the property. We didn't get that far. That was a dream for us. That never materialized. Not 6 houses on the property. So, in the meantime, while we were living here, we planted... wait, let me first finish. Yes, Mr. RAILA came on the property in December 2016 for the first time. He came on the property another 5 times in 2019, if I'm correct, in the month of July. I eventually had to go to the police station and get an OB number and a lawyer's letter to please to Mr. RAILA's lawyers, telling them please to tell their client not to come onto the property unauthorized. And then I got John's probate and his grant of certification in 2018. But unfortunately, I had fallen in 2018 and damaged my right knee, where I had a partial knee replacement, and I immediately had to go onto crutches, and my orthopedic surgeon in Nairobi suggested I go to South Africa to the orthopedic surgeon that did the partial knee replacement and have a full knee replacement done. So I flew to South Africa in 2018 to have the knee replacement done, and got back to Kenya in January 2019. I came down to Malindi in February 2019 and went to the Lands Department. I had already filled in the application forms to transfer the original title deed in my late husband John's name into my name. I'd put all the documentation and everything into the Lands Department. So yes, when I went there in February 2019, I was shocked to find out that it was rejected. And it was rejected by Mr. Atman because of case 41 of 2012. And that was the first time that I had actually heard of the court case 41 of 2012. So, and it was because of this court case and because there was a caution put on my property. So I went straight to Malindi Court and asked, you know, can I maybe please just see what's happening, you know? Obviously at this time I didn't even know about all this backup stuff on John's laptop and Virginia Shaw saying that this 41 of 2012 was actually nullified because it held no essence. But yeah, it was being used. So I immediately had to appoint a lawyer to find out what was happening. And 41 of 2012 has just been going from year to year to year. Suddenly there was other court cases added on to this 41 of 2012, and it was just escalating. And then we heard there's a judgment. I mean, I was in such a state, I left everything up to my lawyer, who was Mr. Bahati Mumuye was my lawyer at the time, and the judgment was given, and suddenly on the last time I heard from my lawyer was on the 28th of November 2022. So I didn't know everything had stagnated. I didn't even know that he had stopped being my lawyer. There was no response from him. I did, yes, he didn't answer his phone, nothing, and then no, I didn't. No, I didn't at all. I didn't expect anything. I was so in the dark about everything.
Suspecting. Did you suspect anything from him when he was not communicating back to you?
No, I didn't, because we'd paid him so much money, you know, and we'd come to an agreement with him. And Yes, it was just a big shock to me, and eventually my son said, Mom, we're going to have to do something. And then I don't know how it happened, but a friend of mine, Francis, who was the narrator for The Last Messiah, phoned me to ask me how I was, because he always used to call me Mama. Actually, most people, yeah, and the villagers call me Mama John. But I told Francis what was happening, and he said he's got a good lawyer for me. So that's where I was introduced to Victor Tuya, and he took over the case. I stepped back, and my son took over because I was in a state. Because I also had, unfortunately, another fall and had to have another knee replacement in November 2022. But I had to have it done at MP Shah